I know everyone's very keen to go and get lunch, but we have a few minutes that I thought we could have a few questions to any of our speakers from this morning to sort of, we're the beta test to see how all the other sessions are going to deal with question and answer periods. So I'm going to look for a few hands going up, and I think we've got runners around with microphones who can give you a microphone, and please address your question to one of the speakers. There's one question over there.
Good morning. My question's for Dr. Sam Baldwin. Noticed on a few of the slides that storage was an increasing portion in the scenarios that you investigated. Could you provide some more details about how that plays into the scenarios?
Okay. A very interesting question and an important question. One of the things that people have thought for a long time was that storage was a critical element throughout, and that you had to have very large amounts of storage to handle the variability of wind and solar in particular. And what we found is that that is actually not the case. Yes, more storage is helpful. It provides an important role in the system, but that by smoothing out the variability across a large geographic area, a lot of the requirement for storage is much less than what you would otherwise normally expect. So in our system, we had it set up, the model runs could take in storage as needed, and so storage did get built out, particularly at the very high levels of penetration. But the level of penetration of storage was much moderated compared to what people had thought historically.
Hi, this question is also directed to Mr. Baldwin. So I'm a student at UGA, and I was noticing on your slides that, especially looking at the diverse array, region by region of different sources and renewable sources that we could move to, I was still seeing a lot of coal being used and other fossil fuels being used in the Southeast. And I was wondering if you could, especially considering, sure, if nationally we decreased our use of fossil fuels, we could see a net decrease in greenhouse gas emissions, but there's other externalities, especially looking at public health and air quality locally, that are valuable to consider when looking at transitioning. So I'm wondering if you could comment a little bit on why the Southeast seems to demonstrate, or the estimates will include continued relatively high uses of coal.
Yeah, good question. And the answer to that is that we used assumptions to start out with that had coal as the least cost supplier. Natural gas prices were still relatively high compared to where they have fallen in the last year. And so we did not include any consideration of externalities. Now, if you look at the impact of externalities from coal in particular, the National Academy of Sciences did a review 3 years ago called The Hidden Costs of Energy Use. And within that, what they identified that the particulates in particular, their impact on human health and morbidity as well as agriculture added up to about 3 cents per kilowatt hour for use of coal, much of that coming from older plants. And so as we go forward, that kind of consideration needs to be taken into account. And on top of that, things like the mercury control rules now that have just been put into place will also impact that. So my expectation is that going forward, even by having renewables take over 80%, if that's the pathway that's followed, 80% of all power generated, that there will also be a push to address some of these externality issues coming from coal and looking at cleaner sources of fossil energy or cleaner coal plants themselves.
Thank you. My question is for Steve. My name is Jerry Spivey from Louisiana State University. I wonder if you could comment on DuPont's initiatives in biobutanol. I recall that there was an initiative in the UK that was focused on biobutanol as a substitute liquid fuel. If you could comment on that.
Our biobutanol is being developed in a joint venture with British Petroleum. The efforts are going very strongly. We have a list of first adopters. Biobutanol is an excellent fuel in that it can be blended into the existing fuel supply without a lot of changes to the infrastructure. It also has a very high density. We're working on a model to convert corn ethanol plants to biobutanol plants. And so we expect to be making announcements on those conversions in the near future. So the program's going well. I'd say, there's more technical challenges in biobutanol than there is in cellulosic ethanol, but we're meeting those challenges and will drive to success.
I have a question for Ambassador Sean. My name is Robin Rogers from the University of Alabama. Ambassador, I understand that the people of Denmark are among the happiest in the world, but I also understand that the cost of living is also among the highest. Now, you've been ambassador now to the U.S., and you've seen something of our people and our economy. How difficult would it be for the U.S. population to accept the type of sacrifice that the Danish people have quite happily taken?
Thank you for the question. I think it's an extremely good question, but also a very difficult question, I would say. I've had to correct you because I am ambassador of title, but I'm the deputy chief of mission here at the embassy in DC. Well, I know that the Danes seem to be very happy. We just had a survey made, and I think they said that the Danes are actually the happiest people in the world. And when I go back to Copenhagen, I often surprised because it rains, and it's dark, it's cold, But I think we have something in the society that we have developed throughout centuries, actually. The Danish society, as you said, is a very expensive country to live in. We pay very high taxes, and I say very high taxes, but in return, we get free schools, free universities, free hospitals, etc. Even students at universities, they get a grant from the government, $1,000 a month, just to study. So in many ways, we get a lot of benefits back from the States. And I think that in Denmark at the moment, we have a social democratic coalition government. We've also had conservative, liberals, European liberals governments, and we all have the same idea that we want the social welfare state to be. Whether or not it's you can translate that to other countries, of course, is a very difficult question. I think that you have a little bit here in the US, the discussions between the Democratic Party and the Republicans. That there you see a question. Should the state be big? Should it be smaller? So I think maybe on a small scale you can translate things to other countries. But I'm not saying that the Danish system as such is a way you can change a lot of countries, and maybe you shouldn't go that way. It's something that you will have to develop if you want to go that direction. The Nordic countries all have similar systems somehow, yeah. So, but I think you will find a lot of objections in the US if you would have the same kind of tax. I didn't say that in my presentation, but there's also another reason why 33% of people commute to work on their bicycles every day, and that is because the cars in Denmark, they are extremely expensive because they are taxed heavily. So everything in Denmark that are above normal, like a car, like drinks, beers, etc., cigarettes, are taxed very heavily. So you're the one to decide if you can sell that in the US.
Well, there's one over there, yeah.
Yeah, my question is for Stephen from DuPont. One issue that you didn't really talk about is the blend wall. And I understand the need for cellulosic, but how will RFS2 be fulfilled without some change to the blend wall limit? How do you see that playing out, and how do you foresee dealing with that issue?
Can you turn, okay, this mic is on. So the blend wall is, for people, is how much ethanol can be blended into gasoline and sold at the pump. And so historically, it's been at about 10%. So to get to the mandated levels, we need to take the ethanol content in our fuel supply up to about 22%. Butanol helps with some of the blend wall issues, but we believe most of it will be driven by ethanol. So the EPA is currently approved up to E15 now to be sold at the pump. So personally, what I'd like to see, we have three pumps typically. We have an 87 octane pump, an 89 octane pump, and then a higher octane pump. Almost all the 87 octane has 10% ethanol in it. Ethanol increases octane. I'd like to see the 89 octane pump converted to a 15% octane, and then the consumer can decide on which fuel he wants to use. And then in addition, I think the use of flex fuel vehicles to go up with an increasing amount of vehicles on the roads using E85 will be necessary in order to get the overall ethanol content into the fuel supply. So this is the Brazilian model. In 2013, Brazil will use about 25% ethanol in its fuel supply. So it's been proven to work, and it's just going to be a matter of having the will. Now, I mentioned people who don't like the RFS or the Automotive Manufacturers Associations are concerned about warranty issues. The American Petroleum Institute is concerned about the need for infrastructure modification in order to increase the ethanol content in the fuel supply. And so people don't like the mandated levels that are there, but it's what's going to be required to make sure the investment takes place. And so as long as the RFS stays in place, we believe the necessary modifications to the blend wall will happen.
Okay, one last question.
My name is Jonathan Wires. I'm an undergraduate from the University of Florida. My question is for Dr. Baldwin. You mentioned in your presentation that you're able to get to almost 80% capacity on the intermittent energies with still providing stability on the grid. My question for you is, what inherent advantages is the U.S. grid, what novel designs, or what assumptions are made in your model that allow for that kind of stability in the United States that has not been experienced during the German green energy revolution?
Thanks very much. Yeah, the question about stability, we only got down to hourly simulation, so we did not look at the stability issues which can get down to the minute and second level. Now, more broadly, we included a whole range of renewable technologies, not just solar and wind, which in the very high penetration level came up to about almost 50%, 50% of all the power. But we also had geothermal, biomass, hydro, concentrating solar thermal, and others that are dispatchable sources of power. And so what you have is, as you get to higher penetrations, several things help. First, you have an ability, because you're aggregating power over a large area, just statistically, that smooths out the amount of power that's coming in and addresses a lot of these issues. The second is you do have dispatchable power on the supply side, as I mentioned. Third is you can do things like demand response on the demand side so that you can adjust the amount of power demanded. That's already used widely in the United States today. More could be done. So there's a whole series of things that can help contribute to providing power that is meeting the consumer need and does address the concerns that people have historically thought would happen, but actually, as renewable technologies have penetrated the markets, We have not seen it so far in the United States, across the United States, even where there's been high penetration of wind up, into the 30, 40, 50% range during some periods of the day. It has been possible to handle that kind of variability.
Sorry, I just had time to think here for the question here. If you ask if things could be adopted to the US, one thing I would like to add is actually that in the past 40 years, as I said in my presentation, Danes have gotten used to that resources, water, electricity, they don't come up just from nothing. You have to pay for it. So since I was a child, I was always told that whenever you brush your teeth, always turn off the tap, because water is a resource. We have plenty of it in Denmark, but it's still a resource, and you have to think about it. When you get your bill in Denmark for electricity, you have a line saying green tax. The same when you have water, pay for your water, which is quite expensive. You even think about if you take a bath, if you're going to bathtub, or you take a shower, because you can actually feel it in your pocket somehow. So I think it is something that maybe you can start gradually to introduce in countries, that it's not free, and that even from when you're a child, get used to that these things are a scarce resource, expensive resources you have to think about. And I think this is the only way somehow of gradually educating that it actually costs money. If you would see the petrol prices in Denmark, I think you would get surprised as well. I think you would take the bike sale then, so, sorry.
Well, on that shocking thought, let's all go out to lunch. I think it's across the area here. Just go out these doors.